Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me spend some time with you today. Although, with what I've got to say, you might wonder why you've listened to this. This, I'll be honest, is mostly for the folks in the United States, but hopefully everybody else can glean from this as well. If you happen to be listening to the audio only, appreciate it. Had some really interesting statistics come through this week, but I don't have time to tell you about those today. Have you ever been talking to someone and they say, wouldn't it have been great to live in those fascinating biblical times? Well, I've learned to think about that this way. Aren't we living in them now? Think about it. We're not, watching the Red Sea parted or anything like that, but we're watching some interesting things happen, aren't we? And I'm not saying that we're seeing or hearing prophecy being fulfilled or anything like that. What I'm saying is we're living in times just like everybody else lived in through history, just like it. Is anybody going to write anything about it? I don't know. We'll see, right? The problem is that, much like our predecessors, right? They gossip, they spread rumors. We're exposed to the same thing today. And it comes from people guessing at why that happened, how that happened. And they have very, very little knowledge of the event itself. And I read something and it made me cringe. I'll be honest with you. It takes a lot to get under my skin. I've said often I'm hard-headed and thick-skinned. It takes a lot. But this made me cringe. It actually compared the protests that are going on currently in the United States over ICE agents killing a young lady with the protesters in Iran. And the person who wrote this said there's no difference. Now, that statement is a very good example of how ignorant some people are of what's really happening. So let's kind of set the table, so to speak, and look at what led up to the events in Iran. About 50 years ago, so this has been going on for a very, very long time, most of my life. Iran was a nation that was well respected in the world. The Iranian people were as happy as anyone could be in the 1970s, right? It was a nice time to be alive, I assume. I was growing up then. It was okay. The economy of Iran was growing as any oil-rich nation would be at the time. And Iran, at the same time, was kind of walking that fine line between holding on to a very rich heritage. Not everything that happened in Iran was bad all the time. But they were holding on to that rich heritage, and they were trying to incorporate that with a more modern lifestyle that a lot of people were beginning to enjoy. Some folks didn't like it. There was a minority faction, and they decided, the old ways are better than the new ways. And this faction, as regular listeners know, it can be traced to the sons of Nimrod. If you want more on that, there is a whole podcast about that. They were opposed to anything that had to do with our Creator whatsoever. They didn't want Christianity. They didn't want Judaism. They hated everything and everybody. If you didn't bow down to them, they didn't care. Now, there was a series of conflicts, and the Shah of Iran was, of course, deposed. The Ayatollah came into power, and most of the world condemned this action. But instead of the Ayatollah and his regime reaching out to the world in peace, they chose to stand against it, and they decided, we're going to sponsor terrorism around the world. They became a terrorist nation. And if that wasn't bad enough, the Ayatollah and his successors decided to support these terrorists outside of Iran with a whole lot more money than they were spending inside Iran. Basically, they squandered the resources of Iran supporting terrorists, and they refused to support the people living inside Iran. We see the the accumulated the accumulated effects today. Basically, Iran is destitute. The Iranian rial, their currency, if you compare that to the U.S. dollar today, it's just over $1 million to 1. It takes just over $1 million rial to equal $1 U.S. dollar. Inflation is rampant. The infrastructure there is in such bad shape. It's estimated their reservoirs are at 5% capacity. That means they are 95% empty. They have no water. They have no water to raise crops. They have no water to drink. It's a very scarce commodity in Iran right now. The same people that supported the Ayatollah 50 years ago because, things aren't going the way we want them to. Now they're calling for the Ayatollah to be deposed. They don't know what they want. They just know they don't like what they have. Now, it has been reported that the Ayatollah is ready to leave Iran if he cannot stay in control. And I'm recording this on Sunday afternoon. So, and really from what I can see in the news this morning, we're not sure if he's still in Iran or if he's already left. We don't know yet. I think he's still there for the time being, but some people think he's already gone. I've met some very nice people that whose heritage is from Iran. Some one family, I know their parents left Iran as the Shah was falling. Other people who have lived in the United States for several years, they're great people. They're very proud of their heritage. They're great people. I have no problem with the Iranian people. I have a problem with the sons of Nimrod. Okay? But the people who remained in Iran, they've lived there for the last 50 years under the Ayatollah. They've been persecuted. They've been prosecuted. Some have been killed. They're not protesting in Iran because of politics. They're not protesting in Iran because some law enforcement officer shot somebody, killed someone. They're protesting because they want to live. It's that simple. They have nothing left to lose. If things continue the way they're going, they know they're going to die. It's that simple. They're thirsty. They're hungry. They have no money to buy the very things they need to survive. To compare that to the protesters in the United States, many of whom are paid to be outraged, I guess, over ICE or because some young lady made a decision not to follow the instructions of active law enforcement. If to compare those two things and say they're the same is a comparison out of complete and utter ignorance. Evil has no problem destroying itself, and it often takes others with it. Under the regime of the Ayatollah, it's a great example of what happens when you spend more money on hate outside of your own nation than when you take care of the people living inside your nation. Evil is willing to destroy itself when it coerces someone to protest for something they don't understand. Evil is willing to destroy itself when it realizes it's gone too far, too fast, and good decides enough is enough. Now, I could list a whole lot of scripture here. Something that is repeated often is how when evil leaders are in power, the people suffer. All the people suffer, not just a few who are upset, all. And that's what's happening in Iran right now. It's not what's happening in the United States right now. Some people are upset. Some people are completely happy. This is going to sound bad. Whichever side of the coin you're on, that's your choice. That's your choice. It's not the same as what's happening in Iran. But that's the world we're living in right now. Now, I have no problem whatsoever with people standing up for what they truly believe in when they're willing to educate themselves on the subject and they can have an open and honest discussion about it. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with somebody going to prison for something that they believe in wholeheartedly. I do have a problem with someone going to prison for doing something dumb that they should have known better. It's that simple. I do have a problem. When someone speaks without knowledge. The only thing they have is a few talking points, and they only take part to cause trouble. That bothers me. That tells me you're not being you. You don't have the... Let me back up for a second. When you take part in something just to cause trouble and you don't know anything about what you're talking about, that tells me you're not being you. You're being somebody else's pawn. So I'm going to encourage you to think before you speak, think before you act. Don't make yourself look foolish or get yourself killed over something you know very little about. Oh, I'm upset because today is Tuesday. No, that's not a reason. That's not a reason. And I wasn't going to say this, but I'm going to go here. You know, we've seen protesters around the world who want to go out and they'll sit in the middle of a highway or a roadway and they're going to protest. They don't know what they're protesting most of the time. If you're going to do that, if you're going to block traffic, that's your choice. But at least, at the very least, be knowledgeable, be committed. Because if you're going to sit in the middle of a highway, you need to be committed to the point where you understand you may become part of the pavement. It's that simple. The people in Iran are fighting for food. They're fighting for water. They're literally fighting for life. We don't have that in the United States. To compare those two, there's no comparison. There is absolutely no comparison. So just stop. Stop with the foolishness. Stop with the ignorance. Educate yourself. Be knowledgeable. Be knowledgeable. Yeah, it got under my skin. And that rant, hopefully, will get under yours. Because you need, if you have an opinion, great. Understand why you have that opinion. Know why you have that opinion. Know exactly where you stand on a subject. Don't do something foolish. Don't do something foolish. Pray for the people of Iran. Do you realize that about 70% of the people living in Iran are Christian? Yeah, that's true. That is their demographic. And they're being controlled by about 30% who, in my opinion, and I think I can trace them back, are basically the sons of Nimrod. The Iranians are fighting for their life. The Americans are not. It's that simple. That's what it really comes down to. That's what it comes down to. The choice is yours. Something to think about until next time. And until then, many, many blessings, everyone.